Hello everybody and welcome. It's good to see you all. Thanks for joining us this morning. First, I'll provide a bit of context about what's happening. So as we know, Russia are at war with Ukraine, but this is a modern hybrid war, and this means that a battle is taking place both on land and digitally as well. So due to this hybrid nature of the war, business leaders are being warned that there's a heightened cyber threat, and because of that should strengthen their defences. So here's some of the headlines, and on the left we can see the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre have given a warning that there is a heightened cyber threat, and their CEO Lindy Cameron on the top right is wrote in the paragraph to tell people about it as well. And then on top of that, we have joint guidance from numerous international government cyber institutes telling businesses of all sizes that they need to bolster their cybersecurity. So this is affecting small businesses globally, and the message is being repeated in the UK, the US, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand as well. So this is affecting businesses across the world. And here's why. Russia has a history of deploying cyber attacks. So, for example, 1 hour before Russia invaded the Ukraine, Viasat, which is a communications company, was targeted. And the National Cybersecurity Centre have said that it's very likely that this was the Russia government and their target was the Ukraine military. However, other customers were affected, and it disrupted the internet for thousands of people, both inside the Ukraine and in bordering nations across Europe. It also disabled the IT for over 5,000 wind turbines in Germany. So this is an example of how a cyber attack can overspill. And another time, a different cyber attack, it could affect UK businesses. If we are to believe the headlines, Russia is believed to be deploying their cyber tactics really slowly. What they're doing is they're maybe infiltrating some IT, but they're using it to spy and not necessarily deploy a cyber attack at the moment. But it could be a tactic that they use in the future, but they may not as well, as the US have said that they will retaliate should there be any kind of attack. So because of this, the National Cybersecurity Centre say there is no immediate threat, but we must acknowledge that Putin does have this option. And this is why the right-hand side of this screen, a catastrophic cyber war, it isn't an impossibility. We also have the added extra that if Putin doesn't order a cyber attack, there's a possibility that a vigilante hacking group supporting Russia could launch an attack. So as you can see from the bottom left-hand side of the screen, a group called Killnet have basically suggested that. And as the UK is supporting the Ukraine, then the UK is a target. So why does this affect me? It is essentially by virtue that organisations have a growing digital presence and reliance on these digital assets that you could be affected. So it isn't the first time that the Ukraine have been targeted by cyber attacks. They have a history over the past decade of being targeted, but because of this, the Ukraine are actually very good at cybersecurity and have been prepared. So that cyber attack that I told you at the start of the slide, the beginning of this year, they were down for a matter of days rather than months. And this is essentially what our organisations in the UK need to do. We need to prepare the best we can.
Earlier this week, I was reading an article from Microsoft about the Russian cyber activity that they've observed this year. And the article says that the Russian invasion relies in part on a cyber strategy that includes 3 distinct and sometimes coordinated efforts: destructive cyber attacks within the Ukraine, network penetration and espionage outside of the Ukraine, and cyber influence operations targeting people around the world. This highlights Russia's strategy of using cyber before and alongside air, sea and land military operations. It shows what we can expect if things escalate and why there is a heightened cyber security threat. Today, I'm going to inform you about what you can do to protect your business in light of this heightened cyber security threat. The NCSC has issued guidance titled Actions to Take when the cyber security threat is heightened. So I'll cover that, and I'll also explain how you can protect yourself in practical terms. The NCSC guidance lists a whole range of measures that you should take, but I recommend starting with the essentials, and more specifically, cyber essentials, as the 5 themes of cyber essentials form a large part of the guidance that the NCSC has issued. In the 5 themes of cyber essentials are firewalls, secure access control, user access control, firewall, secure configuration, user access control, malware protection, and security update management. And in this session, I'll cover each one, letting you know what it is and what you need to do. So start with firewalls. The objective of the firewall theme is to ensure that only safe and necessary network services can be accessed from the internet. Now, all devices such as network equipment, desktop computers, laptops and servers, these all run services which enable the devices to communicate with each other. And this is what makes computers so great and useful, this communication. But if we leave those services exposed, then it can make us vulnerable to cyber attack. So firewalls can either operate at the boundary or on individual devices. A boundary firewall sits at the edge of your network, and it restricts the flow of network traffic in and out using firewall rules. And this can help prevent cyber attacks by blocking certain traffic and protecting those services. Boundary firewalls are great for protecting the devices that we have inside our company networks, but often we have got devices outside of there, such as when staff work remotely or from home, and that's where firewalls come in, software firewalls come in. And software firewalls work in a similar way to boundary firewalls, but they only protect the single device on which they're configured. Now, you might know that most desktop and laptop systems now come with firewall software that's pre-installed, but these need to be turned on whenever we're outside of the company network, and we must make sure that they're configured in the right way so that we don't expose anything unnecessarily. The next theme of cyber essentials is secure configuration, and the objective here is to ensure that computers and network devices are properly configured to reduce the level of inherent vulnerabilities and provide only the services that they require to fulfill those roles. So I mentioned before that all devices on your network have services, and what secure configuration is doing is looking to minimize the number of services that are running on those machines, because if we reduce the number of services, it reduces the amount of vulnerabilities that we have running on those machines. So in their default configurations, computers and software and network devices, they're not always secure. So standard out-of-the-box configurations can often have many weak points. Things like administrator accounts that have standard default passwords, pre-enabled or unnecessary user accounts, pre-installed or unnecessary applications or services. And these default configurations can provide cyber attackers with a variety of opportunities to gain access to an organization's systems and data, and it's often very easy to achieve. So we can protect ourselves against some common attacks by following some simple procedures at the time that we install new devices. So routinely, we must remove or disable any unnecessary user accounts, change default or easy to guess passwords, remove unnecessary software and services, disable the auto run feature, make sure that we change that usernames and passwords are required to access all devices, and to ensure that devices lock automatically when they're not in use. And whilst these measures are best implemented at the time of installation, because we're now at a point of heightened cybersecurity, it's really a good idea to go back and recheck these things. The third theme is user access control, and the objective here is to ensure that only authorised individuals are issued with user accounts, and then to provide access only to the applications, computers and data that user actually requires to perform their role. So each active user account that's in your organisation enables access to devices, applications and data. And when we ensure that only authorised individuals have user accounts, and that those user accounts are granted only as much access as we need for them to perform their role, we can reduce the risk of information being stolen or damaged. Compared with normal user accounts, administrator accounts have more access to devices, applications and data, and these accounts therefore represent a much greater risk, so we need to limit their use and take greater measures to protect them. Administrator accounts can be used to run things like software or make changes to the system, or to change security settings, or even to create additional user accounts which would be used in an attack. So let's imagine that Fred is working on his computer and his account has administrator privileges across his whole network. Fred receives an email and clicks on a link which executes malicious software on his computer, and that malicious software then encrypts all the data on his computer as well as on all the servers on the network. This then puts the whole business out of operation, and it can do far more damage than if Fred had just been using a normal account that has restricted access. Provide protection for our businesses in this area. We can have a process for creation of to approve the creation of user accounts. We can ensure that all applications or devices require a username and password to access them, or a PIN if it's like a mobile phone or something like that, and that these credentials are unique to every individual. We can remove or disable user accounts that are not required, such as when a user leaves the organisation. We can use multi-factor authentication where possible, and always use multi-factor authentication for cloud services. We can use separate accounts for administrative tasks, and we can remove privileges when they're no longer required, such as when a member of staff changes roles. Passwords are a very important part of user control, and cyber attackers will often try lots of different passwords in order to compromise the system. So we can protect against this type of brute force guessing by implementing further controls around passwords. And these include using multi-factor authentication, restricting the number of logon attempts to no more than 10 within a 5-minute period, and also locking accounts after more than 10 unsuccessful attempts. We should also implement controls to manage the quality of passwords. These include multi-factor authentication, as well as requiring a minimum password length of 12 characters, or we're using a minimum password length of 8 characters and blocking any common passwords with a deny list. To help people choose good passwords that are unique, we can support them in the following ways: by educating them on how to avoid common or discoverable passwords, encouraging them to use longer passwords, such as 3 random words, or providing a secure password manager. We can also not enforce password expiry and not enforce password complexity requirements. Now, those last 2 items are correct, and they differ to what used to be considered good practice. So you might be operating on old information. The thinking behind it is that if passwords are required to be complex and expire frequently, that people will either write them down or they'll use the same few passwords across multiple systems, and this will create a vulnerability in itself. It should go without saying, but if anyone thinks a password has been compromised, then they should change it immediately. MFA, multi-factor authentication, and it should be used wherever is possible, and it should always be used for administrative accounts or for accounts that are accessible from the internet. We see lots of attacks which are designed to capture the credentials of cloud-based systems, such as Microsoft 365. So it's just too risky not to have them protected by MFA. Force control, malware protection. And the purpose here is to restrict the execution of known malware or untrusted software, and this prevents harmful code from causing damage or accessing sensitive data. Malware is software that has been created and distributed to perform malicious actions, and it's often used by cyber attackers. And malware can find its way onto devices through email, downloads or removable media, or direct from the installation of unauthorized software. And it's worth noting that application stores are not immune. Malware infections can cause organizations to suffer from system malfunction, data loss, disruption, or onward infection to customers and suppliers. The ways that we can avoid malware or limit its potential include using anti-malware software to detect and disable it, only allowing trusted software to run via allow listing, or running software in an environment that controls access to other data, known as sandboxing. To be effective, anti-malware software must be kept up to date. It must be configured to scan files automatically on access, and it should also scan web pages, and it should block connections to malicious websites. The final theme of Cyber Essentials is security update management, and the objective of security update management is to ensure that devices and software are not vulnerable to known security issues for which fixes are available. That any device that runs software can contain security flaws. These are known as vulnerabilities. New vulnerabilities are discovered all the time, and product vendors race to provide security updates before the vulnerabilities are exploited by cyber attackers. Product vendors such as Microsoft will only release security updates for products that are still in support. Once out of support, no further updates are released, and this can make obsolete versions vulnerable to attack. Organizations should therefore ensure that Windows software is licensed and properly supported. And I noticed that when I went through a drive-through at a well-known coffee shop the day, the till system had crashed and the display was showing Windows 7 logo on there. So I know that there's a lot of organisations running out of date software, and that particular company wouldn't meet the standards of Cyber Essentials. Okay, so unsupported software should be removed from use. If this is not possible, then those systems need to be segregated and have all traffic to and from the internet blocked. Automating software updates should be enabled wherever possible, and critical and high-risk updates should be deployed within 14 days. So that's the overview of the 5 areas covered by Cyber Essentials. It's firewalls, secure configuration, user access control, malware protection, and security update management. One area that isn't covered specifically by Cyber Essentials, and one that's very important, is about backing up your data. So this means taking a copy of your data and saving it to another device or to cloud storage. If you take backups regularly, it will help you recover quicker if you do have a cyber attack. Automatic backup systems are best, but you need to verify that they are working regularly. And if you back up your information to removable storage, such as a USB stick or an external hard drive, you should disconnect it from your computer when you're not taking a backup. The NCSE has issued guidance, like I said, about actions to take and when the cybersecurity threat is heightened, and you can view that using the link on screen. So as well as the 5 themes that are included in Cyber Essentials and backups, it includes reviewing, logging and monitoring, which will help you identify and recover from attacks, making an incident response plan, checking your domain registration information, getting an external vulnerability scan so that you can identify and fix any vulnerabilities there, ensuring your staff know how to report phishing emails, and reviewing third-party access to your systems. And whilst these are great next steps, my recommendation is to begin with the essentials that we've covered today, as they will prevent the majority of cyber attacks. You're probably thinking that it all sounds like a lot of work, and obviously you've got a day job to do. You know, cybersecurity isn't the business that you're in, and you're right. You know, building and maintaining cyber resilience is an ongoing commitment, and it needs regular attention. The good news is that managed services providers who will take away a lot of the day-to-day work that is needed to get you secure and keep you secure. If you have in-house IT staff, they should be able to keep on top of these essentials for you too. Having said that, the ultimate responsibility for cybersecurity lies with the directors. And hopefully my presentation today will have informed you on what you need to be aware of as you work with your technical people on implementation.
Thank you, James. We will now run through some of the free resources that I'm going to be sending to you after the webinar. So we have an email campaign template and a printable poster. So essentially, cybersecurity, while we have a lot of work to do securing computers and the networks, there's also the human firewall element, which is just as, if not more important. So your team will form a really important part of your resilience, and it's their job to be able to spot scams, to have knowledge of your security policy and know who to report suspicious activity to. So the email campaign is essentially a drip feed of emails that you can send your team over the course of 6 weeks or 12 weeks. There's 6 emails in there, and there's key takeaways and graphics to help reinforce some cybersecurity best practice. And there's also a downloadable poster that you can print out, and there is a section where you can add who to report incidents to, where you can just write on the poster. And we suggest putting those in places where people tend to congregate. So it could be in the toilets, it could be in your kitchen, but it's there as a constant reminder. And the graphics, like I say, they replicate the email campaign, so you're getting a reinforced message. So with more people working from home, has this changed the risk and security over the last 12 months, James?
Well, it makes having people from home certainly makes cybersecurity more complicated. You know, when we look to those firewall options before, if everyone's inside the security of the network, it creates new vulnerabilities when we move them outside of there. So it's more important that we follow the security basics that I outlined earlier.
Great. And I thought it's interesting as well that we no longer say that you should have complex passwords. Is this something new?
Yeah, well, I think the NCSC has been promoting this for quite a while now, but in not having complex passwords and not having the passwords expire, because it's more likely to result in people writing them down on pieces of paper and keeping them in the desk or in the wallet and things like that. And obviously that's a security risk in and of itself.
Right, thank you. That's all the questions. And it just leaves me to say thank you to our speakers and thank you to everyone for attending. As I mentioned, a copy of the presentation recording and slides will be sent to you by early next week, as well as the free resources. Goodbye to everyone that's leaving.